this, you have an opportunity to network, use your network. And with that said, I'm gonna introduce y'all to Ed. He's the moderator for our next panel. I'm gonna go find sometimes you gotta go over and beyond. Go make sure our fellow other panelists are here. And Ed, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell them about you, how you got to Reed Smith, because the Howard connection. And who's your Taylor?
Your Taylor, same Taylor. Well, some of y'all know me already, but my name is Fultz. I'm an associate at Reed Smith. I practice entertainment and media with 3 buckets, I like to say, with sports, music, and movies being 1 bucket, privacy being the second, and trademark and copyrights being the third. I know some of y'all were in the Professor Hampton's trademark class that I taught last semester for a class or 2, so we appreciate y'all being here as well. My Taylor suit, I guess a guy from Miguel Wilson Collection, National Harbor. I did a little plug-in for him. And I think that's all my questions. I mean, I'm gonna tell more about during the panel, but I want that's just a snippet about me so far.
All right, y'all. We coming. Val is going to make it, but we got Tiffany, so y'all get some extra time with Tiffany. And Alexis, we gonna go ahead and be on time and keep it moving. And yeah, Val got 4 minutes. Y'all get a chance to get your introductions and all of that good stuff and tell them about what you're doing. You got it from here, brother.
Of course. Alexis, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. So as we get settled in, do you want to introduce yourself real quick and, just not say too much about your background, but just who you are when you're working?
Sure. I'm Alexis Liistro. I am a patent prosecutor at Schwegman, and I am based in Seattle currently, soon to be in San Francisco, where we have one of our main offices.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Alexis. And we get more about your practice and your background as we get into the panel. Tiffany, you want to do the same? Let the people know who you are?
Sure. Hi, my name is Tiffany Smith. I'm a partner at WilmerHale in the Securities and Financial Services Department. I'm technically based out of New York, but I travel a lot, so I have to say that I'm fully decentralized. So,
just like blockchain?
Yep, that's me. I'm everywhere, but nowhere.
Where do you want to be? That's the question.
Hey, wherever the interesting work is.
Hold on. Okay, well, we'll give.
Here's Val. I see Val.
I see Val.
Yeah, it's Val.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Missed our last panel together, so we can see. Yes. We go. Oh.
Yeah, we ready?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Okay, sure. All right, for sure. Well, welcome again, everybody. Good afternoon. Welcome to the afternoon panel for today's summit. I want to say thank you, Charlie, for everything you've done in hosting, moderating, coordinating, audibling, all the adjectives to make this type of event happen, which is very important for the HBCU Tech Summit to happen every year. This is the 5th annual one. I've been to my 3rd one personally, and I'm happy to go to as many more as I can. So I won't do too much talking during this panel. I'm gonna be the navigator of these 3 great panelists that we have before you. So to introduce myself again, I'm Edward Fultz. I'm an associate at Reed Smith, practicing entertainment and media. My 3 buckets are sports, music, and movies, privacy, and trademark and copyrights. My 3 separate buckets I do for the past 3 or 4 years. And so after that, I'm gonna give it first to our Zoom participant. Let her speak first. Alexis, I know you introduced yourself already, but can you do it again and tell me a little bit more about your background in regards to your practice and one interesting project you're working on today or this week?
So I am a patent prosecutor, meaning I write and prosecute patents at the USPTO, the Patent and Trademark Office. My background is in software engineering and as well as general engineering 20 years ago. So my main focus in patent law is software and more moving into artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the majority of my work as an attorney is actually not with blockchain. Blockchain came in, I went back to school for my LLM a few years ago and was on a 1-year technology law and policy clinic doing blockchain work. And with that, we worked with the Washington State Legislature dealing with how we could use blockchain as in its smart contract form. So the other panelists here are closer to cryptocurrency. Mine is more focused on blockchain work.
Thank you, Alexis. Val, you wanna go next?
Yes. Hello, everyone. Great to see you all here, and thank you for participating, even the people who are participating virtually. So I'm Dahiya. I am a partner in our investment management practice here at Perkins Coie. I'm a traditional securities regulatory and compliance lawyer, and I'm also the managing partner for our DC office. When it comes to interesting projects, there are so many. So many in this space. And it's what makes it, I think, really unique is that technology is a tool, and distributed ledger technology is a tool. Depending on how that tool is used, then you have to look to various different regulatory regimes to figure out what is a compliant path to using that tool. So I'd say one of the interesting projects I'm working on right now is the tokenization of carbon credits. And it's a project where the tokens will be treated as securities, which therefore my expertise comes into play. But yeah, of all the things that I'm working on right now, I would say that's one of the more interesting ones.
Thank you, Val. And last but certainly not least, Ms. Tiffany.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Tiffany Smith. I'm a partner at WilmerHale in the Securities and Financial Services Department. I'm co-chair of the firm's, well, one of the co-chairs of the firm's cryptocurrency and blockchain working group. I also have a traditional securities regulatory and compliance background like Val. We actually know each other from like maybe over a decade ago when I was at the same firm and I was an associate and Val was at the SEC. And they were back when the SEC actually gave no action letters. Val gave my client a no action letter in the context of enforcement action, which I really needed now. So it dovetails perfectly with what I'm doing. So a big part of like, and we'll talk about this more because I think it's relevant to you all. So my background in securities regulatory work, and I started focusing and getting really up to speed with crypto and blockchain about 6 years ago. Now that's the majority of my practice. And so I do a lot of advisory work talking to blockchain and crypto companies, helping them think through what regulatory framework may apply. And I also now defend these companies. So as you might have heard, this little thing called FTX had a bankruptcy, there was some theft, mistakes were made. And as a result, the crypto industry is really coming under attack from a bunch of different regulators. And so one of the things I'm doing for a couple of clients is I'm representing them in front of the Securities and Exchange Commission, like defending them. And as with where my expertise comes into play is figuring out like a regulatory path forward where I would need some type of no action relief, but Val's now sitting next to me, not there. So I'm not sure if I'm going to get it, but like all of that interesting stuff, we can kind of talk about it. But to me, it's really cutting edge. It's really novel because there are no like crypto companies that are registered with the SEC for the most part.
Right.
So it's really like uncharted waters. You're thinking about, you're using, you know, my experience being a securities regulatory attorney and trading traditional securities to understand where the framework works, where it doesn't, where we need relief. And it's just to me, it's very interesting. We'll talk about this more because it's in part because of the work I did, 6 years ago, which put me into this position.
Thank you. So you see, while we have this esteemed panelists of great accomplishments and achievements with their backgrounds, I would like to let the panelists introduce themselves, not me read off their bios, can make it more intimate, make it more of a collective as a whole. So get right into it. So we know these big terms, Bitcoin, the central bank digital currency, and those terms associated with that. So from broad 10,000 landscape, and anyone can take this question, what's the current status of Bitcoin and the regulation of the central bank? Anyone can take that.
So when you're thinking about the status of Bitcoin and how it's characterized, then I think you're really looking at are you looking at it just as a commodity, a store of value? How are you using it? So generally speaking, anybody who read New York Magazine's, Gensler's the chair of the SEC, he's been the most vocal when it comes to the regulation of crypto assets. And in his most recent articulation, Bitcoin is the one digital asset that he is still, it seems comfortable designating as simply a commodity as long as it's traded in the spot market, traded spot, as opposed to fractionalized or a part of some type of mining or staking or earn program. It's still pretty much considered a commodity for all practical purposes. However, at the end of the day, it's really how is it being offered and sold. That's what's going to determine the legal characterization of the asset.
And for Tiffany, as you talked about the post FTX scandal, how did that affect Bitcoin in so many words? And what's the future look like post scandal?
So FTX didn't necessarily affect Bitcoin, and like let's kind of bucket Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is like not the first, but the most successful like cryptocurrency, and it really is a store of value. Some people talk about it as a form of digital gold. And the transformational aspect of Bitcoin is the blockchain ledger that's used to validate transactions. So what this comes down to, and I'm going to tee this up because Alexis probably has comments about this, with her practice, like generally speaking, people do not trust each other, right? If I say like,
especially in financial transactions.
oh, absolutely, yeah, that's all like other people's money, like, right? So it's like if I say, give me $20 for this bottle of water, like, you know, and we're not in the same room, like there's going to be some mechanism or some intermediary to make sure that happens, right? So the reason blockchain was so transformational, and this actually came out of the context of distress with the financial crisis of 2008, was that instead of meeting like a central party to like say person A and person B do the right thing and make the transfer, and use really complicated computations to be able to validate transactions. Like, right, that process is called proof of work. It's also controversial because there's a lot of energy consumption that takes part as a result of that process. So I bucket Bitcoin and blockchain, right? The next most successful cryptocurrency is Ethereum / Ether. Ether is a native token, but Ethereum is a network, and it's very transformational because it allows the building of smart contracts and a bunch of tokens built on top of that. So we're going to talk about NFTs later. Like NFTs, a lot of them are built on the Ethereum protocol, right? So Bitcoin's off to the side. Then you have Ethereum and all these other tokens, sometimes built on the Ethereum network, sometimes other networks, right? But like what happened with FTX is one, like that was fraud, like, right? And like, I'm a little like, you know, like I'm not as young as some of you guys in this room, but like it, like there's a lot of statements made about the SBF, who was the CEO of FTX, and how this was like the worst fraud of all time. No, Netflix was right on time with the Bernie Madoff thing, which was 10 times worse, right? Because of his position, right? So it's just straight up fraud. But what that did was, because of the fact that he was stealing customer assets and using them to make political donations and to like, you know, to do all of these things for himself, it made regulators very afraid about how crypto companies were using customer assets. And again, this is different because like we have this concept of blockchain where you have assets like not physically, nothing's physical anymore, but like not held in the same way as traditional securities. So as a resulted in all the regulators becoming increasingly aggressive and wanting to really like, you know, understand what was going on at these crypto companies. And as resulted in the Securities and Exchange Commission sending more subpoenas. They were already investigating, right? But like this deciding, okay, your time is up. We're going to start to bring charges, sending out more subpoenas. Then you have the banking regulators coming in and saying, hey, well, you know, maybe the traditional financial services companies say, hey, oh, FTX, come over here, trust us. We've been known for years as being your trusted intermediary. The banking regulators are like, not so fast, like, right? We don't want crypto to interfere with the banking system, like, right? So you really are kind of boxing and you're kind of putting all of these guardrails on the crypto industry, and it's being attacked from a number of different aspects. And that both like obviously creates lots of work for attorneys who understand the landscape, but it's going to create a lot of opportunities going forward, because what typically happens, even if you go back to how Bitcoin was formed, like you had this issue, right, that like people did not trust the government, so they created this token. They created Bitcoin. They created this way that you didn't need intermediaries. In this moment where you have like this founder of this crypto exchange who purported to be a good actor was stealing a bunch of assets. You're going to have people, technologists in the crypto industry saying, we're not going to let this happen again. Innovation. Then you're going to have regulators who almost like overreact, overcorrect that. So all that means for all of us is just opportunities in a number of different ways. So this is a moment we should think about, because history tells us that when you have moments, there's things that like opportunities are created as a result of that.
And we talked about this at the last panel as well, about when moments in society happen, that's when government tends to wake up and implement either regulation or policy
Reactive.
to reactive, of course. Alexis, I know you I don't use the blockchain expert, but can you talk about the smart contracts use of blockchain in real world scenarios and piggyback off what Tiffany just said?
So I can't see the group there, but out of all the participants we have, how familiar is everyone with just the ideas of the words blockchain, distributed ledger? Do we have general familiarity, or would going over some of these words
It
help?
seems like we do. I see a lot of nods.
We got nods? Okay, just making sure. All right, so from a smart contract form, what we're talking about is using the internet as a whole as a distributed way of keeping records. So we can use, I'm just going to take an example, birth certificates. There are people all over the world that actually don't have access to their own birth certificates, which doesn't give them a legal name, which for many of us, we probably take that for granted. You have a name, a birth certificate came, you've always had access to it. But for literally millions of people, that's something that doesn't exist. So by using something like blockchain, where it's going to be recorded and kept for all time, and the only thing we would need is the internet, you would be able to have your birth certificate be instantly recognizable, assuming the laws follow. So any type of certificate, your marriage certificate, your house contracts, anything that we think of in physical form can also be done digitally using blockchain. So by putting those types of contracts in through law, we can then use them and use technology as it grows to improve ways of communicating legal contracts in places that perhaps just your birth certificate burned down years ago. However that happens. So it's important to be able to work with legislatures as well as technologists together to see where we can get with blockchain, what are the vulnerabilities of blockchain usage, and make sure that the laws help move technology forward instead of overreacting, as everyone's talking about here, and stopping some of these transformative properties of technology.
Thank you, Alexis. And so it's still going the same path. I know we mentioned NFTs, and I guess we should start shifting to that right now. First, I mean, I know NFTs we've been talking about the last, 3 to 5 years especially, but definitely over the past year. Let's do just a breakdown of what is, a non-fungible token versus fungible. And once again, anyone can take that question and the current market of status NFTs in 2023. Val, you want to take it?
I can start off talking about, so an NFT is a non-fungible token. And just because it says it's not fungible doesn't mean it's not fungible. It's just nomenclature. And so it's really a token that can provide access to, it can be a ticket. It could have content attached like imagery or art or music. I mean, you can attach almost anything to an NFT. And a lot of the two primary legal issues that come up when you're talking about NFTs and NFT markets, the intellectual property, whatever you're attaching to it, do you own that? Do you have the rights to it? Is it yours to sell, right? Is it yours to use? And then the other, whenever you're dealing with a token, you have to ask the question, is the way that it's being offered and sold, does that create an investment contract, therefore a security, and therefore it has to be offered pursuant to registration or an exemption therefrom? And where you have, one of the things that Tiffany and Alexis have both hit on is that the uniqueness of blockchain is that you have decentralized blockchains, and then you have centralized blockchains. And when you have, with the beauty of it is that you can have people across the world in different jurisdictions, subject to very different laws, engaging in commerce and in transactions. So that's really what the Bitcoin blockchain was meant to do, to have a decentralized mechanism for people to transact, to exchange value. And then, as Tiffany was talking about, there Ethereum and many other tokens and blockchains that have been created that are more centralized, where you actually can identify the people. Nobody even knows who came up with Satoshi. Nobody can tell you what Satoshi looks like, the person who came up with the Bitcoin blockchain. No one, even if a government wanted to find him and go after him, no one knows the person's identity. I mean, it's truly decentralized. Whereas many other blockchains are centralized, there are a group of people that are working in concert to help it grow, to increase the ecosystem. And so when you're thinking about NFTs, Ethereum is probably the preferred blockchain to issue NFTs, just because the use cases, the smart contracts, the ability to create makes it ideal relative to other blockchains. But that's generally, when you're talking about NFTs, it's a way to attach something to a token and transact using it. Usually it's some type of creative content.
Thank you, Val. Tiffany, you want to add on to what Val said?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose add on the securities piece, like, so if you have an NFT and because of the manner in which it was sold, or if it's fractionalized, i.e. like broken in parts, that can result in it being a security. And the question is, like, why does that matter? And it matters because like a host of regulations would apply if it is a security. So that would mean an NFT platform that's marketing itself as just like a platform for NFTs could actually be an entity that should be regulated with the SEC. That also matters for individuals, because if you were to promote or market a security for a fee, you have to disclose that in a way, in a certain type of way. So an example of this was like Paul Pierce, like just like last week, got accused of violating the anti-touting rules for the same exact token that Kim Kardashian, I think it was like basically everyone. Why didn't they pay me? Everyone else got paid for this. Like, can I get 50 to do nothing? Like, right? So, but it was all about the same exact token. So that gives you like a real life example of why this characterization matters, because it has all of these consequences, like, right? And another example of someone else that messed this up was Rihanna's team. Like right before the Super Bowl, they had an NFT for Have My Money. And like and one of my friends who now is GC at a crypto company, he's like, this is awesome, but this is definitely a security. And like 2 days later, he was like, yep, halted sales, it was security, like, right? So all that characterization is like really important. It's really important to like know the tech and ask the right questions as a practitioner, so you can make the right categorization for your client, like, right? So again, there's like tons of opportunities for people who want to get in the weeds, both about the tech and like understanding like the securities law, or whatever other law like that may apply to that.
And I would say, just to add on to that, it's also important just to understand it from a personal perspective, because there are a lot of people in your personal lives that are also crypto curious and going down that path, and understanding how something should be characterized from a legal perspective. That goes into whether or not it should inform whether or not you purchase it or not. Because if you purchase it thinking that it's just a token and that it can be traded on a secondary market and that you're going to profit from, a secondary sale, and the SEC or a private right of action, a court determines that it's truly a security, then you just lost your investment. There's no place for you to transfer that token. There's no exchange. There's no national securities exchange that can list, tokenized securities. So when you're thinking about it from a personal perspective too, it's important to be paying attention to the legal ramifications.
NFT Moments, great example. Like, right, there's a class action, like, probably like it was a while ago, and I think they just got to the point where the defendant, so Top Shots, did not get, or I think it was Dapper Labs, they didn't get summary judgment. So it's going to be a question of fact as to whether or not NFTs are securities. So if you're one of those people who was like all hyped up and bought like 10,000 ETH or whatever, or like shot, like it's a real life question, like that's going to come out of whether or not that's security. And if it is, like, the next question is like, what do you do with that? And right now, as I was like talking about what I'm like working on right now, there's not really a regulatory path for you to trade these unregistered securities.
No, and just,
Yesterday-
no, go ahead, please, Alexis, go
If I
ahead.
may. So on a totally different set of laws, yesterday there was a case out of New York. Does everyone know what a Birkin bag is? My sister is a fashion designer.
Question.
I do not.
There was a case out of New York yesterday saying that NFTs are not protected speech. Birkin sued a creator of an NFT. If you look up Meta Birkin, you'll be able to pull up. It's just a bunch of images of a Birkin bag that Birkin took issue with regarding their trademarks. And so that just came out yesterday, so that it's ongoing. We still need to kind of figure out what's going on there. But that's a very different use than what any of us are kind of specializing in. So just to think about when you're making or buying or using NFTs, the intellectual property rights are very important. And just because it's digital doesn't mean that you're not still infringing intellectual property rights, whether it's trademarks, copyrights, patents.
No, of course. Thank you, Alexis. I did not see that, so we appreciate that plug-in for the lawsuit that was filed yesterday. And so we mentioned about this, how the law is always behind, and it felt like we're always catching up in multiple avenues when it comes to cryptocurrency, blockchain, privacy in general. And so I guess we talked about this in the last panel as well, about being a technical lawyer. And what does that mean about your background? And so kind of divvying from the topic at hand, as a lawyer dealing with this ever emerging landscape in space, is it better to have some type of technical background to deal with cryptocurrency and blockchain? Or as we said, you know, kind of learn as you go, depending on the upcoming lawsuits and cases coming about. Alexis, you want to go first with that one? Trying to switch it around from the round robin.
I'm not sure if I would be the person to start that off.
Okay,
with
go ahead.
lawsuits, actually.
No problem. Tiffany, Val?
I can go. So I think that that everyone should like have ownership of their career, and like if you're interested in having a tech like type of career or tech focused career, I think you should do the work to become an expert. And I'll share a little bit of my story. So I don't have like a technical like IP type of background. And I highlight that because like I happened to be on a webinar. I hosted a webinar yesterday with my IP folks talking about like IP issues in crypto and blockchain. And it was funny because they did their description of like crypto and blockchain. It was very different from my description, but as they're doing it, they're highlighting all of these technical things because they have technical backgrounds. As you've heard a bit about, I can do a description, but I have a different background. And the reason I was able to do that is because back in, was it 2017, 2018, there was this report called the Dow report. And the SEC essentially said that if you have a crypto asset, depending on, no matter if you call it a token, whatever you call it, if it's a security because it meets the investment contract test under Howie, it needs to be registered as a security. And all the intermediaries that transact in that security also need to be registered. My practice, our practice is with the intermediaries, like, right? It's not my practice, and it wasn't back then, to apply Howie and say whether or not something is a security. But back in 2017, 2018, whenever that was, like, I think I was about to make partner, I had just made partner, and I saw an opportunity. Right now, at that time, there wasn't a bunch of law, and it wasn't a bunch of work in the intermediary space. Everyone was worried about whether or not they were a security, but I saw an opportunity, and I had, you know, and committed to myself to spend, first it was kind of like, you know, when I had time, I would kind of look into this stuff. And then over COVID, I committed to spend at least 20 minutes each day, keeping abreast of like what the updates were. So there's like, I listen to Decrypt Daily, which is actually a technical, non-legal podcast, like, right? I read like Law 360, the crypto part. Now I read Lundberg, right? So is making a commitment to myself to come up to speed on these issues. And just like with the book Outliers, if you commit like 10,000 hours over time, you become an expert. And the divide between like what you know and what the average person knows just grows. So now 6 years later, like, right, it goes from, and that was at the SEC, she can talk to this, like, right, if you are a securities attorney particularly, everyone cares about when you came out of the SEC, like, right, that's your, like, that's kind of like, everyone's always asking, well, this is great, Tiffany, what does a person from the SEC say, like, right? Now we've totally flipped that, like, right, because I have the technical knowledge. People who are at the SEC are asking me to talk to the clients because they don't understand the tech, like, right? So, like, there's opportunities, like, I'm not a technical person at all, but I made the commitment. I saw the opportunity, made commitment to myself to, like, learn this. And now years later, like, I've become an expert in a way that's very different from, frankly, a lot of people, like, out there. We can probably count on our hands how many people know, like, technical securities law and crypto. There's a lot of crypto lawyers out there, very few securities lawyers. Like, everyone wants to be a crypto lawyer because it's sexy. You can go on crypto Twitter, and literally people who, like, are known, who are chambers ranked crypto lawyers. I've been co-counsel. I'm like, you don't know what you're doing, bro. Like, or woman. Like, it's like, but, like, and, frankly, we don't get those opportunities. Let's be clear about that. Like, right. So it's like, it's like you have an opportunity if you see something that you're interested in, right? And especially tech, because it's not something that everyone can do. And especially, like, litigators, not to pick on litigators, like, the practice of, like, learning enough of the law, enough of, like, the industry for your case, it's totally different than being an expert, like, that you can carry on. So there's a lot of opportunity if you want to put the work in.
And I would say they're not mutually exclusive, right? You don't have to choose tech versus a specific area of law. I think of technology as a tool, and it's constantly evolving, and it will continue to do so. And I'm going to date myself. I remember when securities went from being manual certificated securities to being uncertificated electronic based. And now this, to me, it's just another iteration. It's just another evolution in the step of the way that we'll use technology. And I started looking at distributed ledger technology all the way back in, like, 2012, when the SEC was first like, okay, what is Bitcoin? What is the Bitcoin blockchain? Do we need to be concerned? How are we going to respond to this? And so I say that to say that they're not mutually exclusive. Clearly, I'm a securities lawyer. But in order to be a really good securities lawyer, I have to do the work and understand the technology, because my practice is so focused on the intermediaries, and the intermediaries are the ones that are using that technology as a fundamental tool, as a part of their business. So it is my job and my ethical obligation to understand my client's business and how they're leveraging technology to however they plan to use it to make money, or to comply with the rules and regulatory framework that they operate in.
Hi, Anya from Howard Law. So you just talked about technology being used as a tool for businesses. I wonder, since the wealth divide was, made apparent during COVID, how those without access to technology would be able to use, like, blockchain and crypto as a tool to, give themselves an opportunity.
So that's an interesting question, because you have a very strong and vocal movement in the crypto community about how important it is to the unbanked parts of the world, which is a large segment of the world's population. And oftentimes it disproportionately impacts people that look like us. And so there's a belief that through distributed ledger technology, you can start to condense that and reduce that divide. However, I still, and this is where my technology acumen falls short, I still don't see, if you don't have access to internet, how are you transacting? And just like what Alexis was saying, for people who don't have birth certificates. So you think about credentials. So fingerprints, driver's license, your law degree, all of that stuff can be accessed in a blockchain and independently verified without even having to disclose all of your private information, right? There can be a smart contract and an algorithm written that would just validate. But you still have to have electricity. You need internet. So it's hard for me to figure out how that, without there being a commitment across the world to really provide a floor level of technology to underserved populations, I don't know how that divide, how you close that divide. like, because I read about it all the time. I don't see the connection, but I hope someone else has the answer because I surely don't.
There is, I mean, this is an ethical issue that comes across the whole world and in areas where, you know, if we're in areas where there's literally no electricity, it's going to be impossible. But as internet is becoming more and more available, and I'm going to date myself now, I don't know how many of you have used an internet cafe back in the day when internet wasn't available in our homes. Internet cafes went out of style in most parts of at least the United States, but around the world, internet cafes are coming back because of things like distributed technologies, being able to get online to do something specific, not just to get online and read the news or Facebook or whatever it is that seems interesting about the internet, but to use these things to send money, to validate credentials that doesn't take as much time. Somebody just mentioned very common in Mexico. So a technology, internet cafes that seemed popular in the 90s could now be reinitiated around the world at a lower cost than everybody having to have their own access to their own computer. And because of the way blockchain works in general, you can think of, if I needed to send somebody money, it can all be done fairly automatically without having to have a bank account. I mean, there is endpoints where you need to give and receive money, but lots of this can be done quickly via the internet if you have that access. Without any internet access, it is obviously still impossible.
No, thank you. I want to just deviate to that conversation because I think it's important to show how it doesn't really matter about your background, where you come from. If you want to be engaged in the space, you can. All you gotta say, do the homework. Take 20 minutes out of your day to read up on the current legislation, landscape of what's going on. Be aware of the players, the security laws coming out, the ones back in the day and the ones current, and be abreast of this information. It's new. It's changing every day, every month, every year. And if you want to stay on top of it, how can you be your best advocate for your clients and for your employer to assign these current regulations? So not going more back to the topic at hand, inflation. So that's always a big word. And we keep hearing that this coming recession is coming, in many ways, different sectors of the economy. So how does inflation interact and relate to cryptocurrency and blockchain?
If I could actually just interrupt, I have one more thing to say, sorry, about what you were saying before. I didn't want to interrupt your question. Both of these panelists talked about how they learned cryptocurrencies. So my background as a patent attorney, you are required to have a technical background, but I went to college back in 2000, graduated college in 2006. So cryptocurrency wasn't a thing. So in the same way that they learned cryptocurrency is the same way I've learned cryptocurrency is reading books. Audiobooks are my favorite thing because you can just plug them in and listen and still be doing other things. So it really is all about keeping abreast of what the technological changes are and then seeing what your interest is. You don't have to go back and take classes necessarily. And if you do want to take classes, there are tons of free classes available through things like MIT and Harvard online that you can listen to. Sorry to interrupt.
No, of course. No, of course. And for me, I have a coding background. So I did coding for about 10 years before this whole law school thing. So I knew about Python algorithms, but still, even that, coding is not the same thing as cryptocurrency. So even for me, as someone younger, I still have to be learning what's going on, the current updates, the law. I know how it works because of my personal consumer use, but the law and the regulation behind it, that's really what helps me go into this field. So, but yes, just to repeat the question, about inflation, how does inflation interacts and relates to cryptocurrency and blockchain?
I think so. There was a myth prior to this inflationary environment that crypto, Bitcoin in particular, which is really thought of as a store of value, was going to hedge against inflation. I remember like 2021 being at like a summit in like New York City, but so before the downturn with crypto, and like all of these like OG like private equity guys basically like, yeah, like inflation is like crazy and like Bitcoin's a digital store of gold, and because there's a finite supply of it, it's a hedge, and like if you're not investing in Bitcoin, you're dumb, blah blah blah. Meanwhile, here we are, and as the stock market, like people thought for sure that like the stock market in the inflationary environment would be inverse to crypto and blockchain. Sorry, crypto and Bitcoin. That has not happened, like, right? So I think it's kind of the verdict is out as to like, it's still not clear to me like what the fundamentals are behind cryptocurrencies and including Bitcoin. But I think this whole promise of it being an inflationary hedge has not come to fruition.
And I think it goes to notions of just when you're thinking about inflation, you're looking at money supply. And so when you're like the dollar, where we have high inflation right now, you look at the basket of goods, it costs far more to buy that basket of goods right now. Your dollar goes a lot, far less than it did, 4 years ago. So the whole idea is to raise interest rates, to discourage spending, and therefore to control supply and demand, to diminish the demand. And the thought that crypto was completely untethered, but it's still a confidence game. And and it's even more speculative than cash, because you have a government that is backing good faith in that government. And the US dollar is still the reserve currency. And so when you look at what's happening with the dollar, it's not, people still look at cryptocurrencies and they're the same people that are making the same decisions about how they invest their dollars. And so they kind of run parallel instead of inverse to one another, or at least that's what we're seeing today.
And as Tiffany said, the myth about Bitcoin being hedged in leading into that myth is the fact that there only can exist 21 million Bitcoins, and this is Bitcoin specific, other tokens are different, but there can only be 21 million Bitcoins. So by that logic, inflation would affect Bitcoin differently. But because Bitcoin is such a new concept, less than 15 years, we really don't have the historical impacts or records of what will happen in something like this. So we're all learning. It's a guessing game, really.
No, it is a guessing game, and we'll see what the next 2 to 3 years look like, especially if this recession does come during this climate of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin. What will happen with it? Alexis, going back to blockchain. So why is there societal people, consumers, lack of trust in blockchain related products? Is it related to what we just talked about, or is it something completely different about this lack of trust?
So from my perspective, there are two ways of looking at it. Part of it is the technological misunderstanding of what blockchain is and what it means to be distributed, how it is that people access blockchain. It seems to the average person relatively unrealistic because it's not tangible. So there's a lack of trust in what you can't see. And most people aren't going to understand things like a hash function, what that means. And for this purpose, that doesn't matter what that means. But if you tell somebody, don't worry, your money or your transcript or your birth certificate, it's secure because of a large mathematical function, they're going to say, well, I don't know what that means. I can't figure that out. So I don't want to trust something like that. Whereas I trust big names, big banks, big government agencies. But then you have a different portion of the population that says, I don't want centralized government having control over my documents, my money, whatever it is that you want to put on a blockchain. And so you have, it's not particularly whether or not somebody's technologically savvy or not, or whether they trust the government or not, but it's a combination of the two. And being that the public internet as we know it has only existed for less than my lifetime, less than 40 years. All of this new technology has been happening so quickly that everybody has to say, for a while, the words blockchain and Bitcoin seemed to mean the same thing to a lot of people. They just said, well, that's Bitcoin. And well, blockchain can be used for so many other things other than cryptocurrency, but we aren't actually seeing those things on a daily basis. So until they start becoming regular everyday uses of blockchain, I think there's always going to be a trust issue.
And just to tackle on that, Alexis, what else can blockchain be used for? I was talking this to my peers yesterday, and they didn't know that there were other uses for blockchain. So can you name a few examples of what those other uses are?
Well, so one of the things you want to focus on is what is your use? What is the individual use for it? So smart contracts can be anything. The idea of a smart contract, and if you want to base it in Ethereum, is saying if this, then that. So it's just code that says if I give X amount of money to somebody via a crypto wallet, then they give me the title to their car. And it's an automatic code that goes through. So there's no intermediary person that needs to exist. There's no middleman, middle person that has to exist. It's just the decentralized system of the blockchain, the Ethereum network in this case. So you could transfer ownership of houses, papers, you know, cars, anything that has ownership, you could transfer ownership. You could use it for, so in my world, the patent world, we have a whole patent assignment record system. Patent assignments could all be done, all it is, signing over legal contracts. It could all be done using blockchain, and it would be instantaneous and it would be there forever. But it's coming up with whether or not everybody or a system of people want to get together and say, yes, let's use blockchain for transferring of patent assignments.
Thank you, Alexis. And for Val and Tiffany, do you still think there's a lack of trust in the cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and blockchain space? Or you think now that people are starting to get more used to these terms, people become more familiarized with it, they're more acceptable of it?
I agree with, I don't know if it's Tiffany or Alexis who made the point about the trust in institutions and names and governments. I think that when you see institutions start to mass adopt the use of distributed ledger technology, then that will lend trust and legitimacy. It is still such a nascent technology. It has not been proven. It has not been put through its paces. And so until the technology is refined, finessed, and matures, there will continue to be mistrust. And usually when you see institutions start to adopt the use of something, that's when you pretty much know, because you're thinking about national security, you're thinking about money supply. That's when you know that you can pretty much, you're like, me as an average Joe, yes, I can trust this because X, Y, and Z trust it. And so you're not looking to put it through its paces yourself. You're looking for indicators in your environment that lend truth to it, that lend trust to it. And so I would say it's inevitable that that day will come. It is not today, though.
Tiffany,
Go
go ahead, Alexis. No, go ahead.
One of the interesting things I think blockchain could be used for more quickly that would be trustworthy because it would be so fast is supply chain issues. Specifically, you go to the store, you buy salad. A couple weeks later, you find out that salad was actually contaminated with E. coli. Behind the scenes, supply chain already exists. All of those numbers and barcodes, we already know how to figure out when that salad was, where it came from, what specific barcodes could have been E. coli and contaminated. But getting that information out to the public is very slow. So using blockchain combined with supply chain would allow for almost instantaneous, literally minutes, hours of information regarding possible infectious diseases or things like that, getting out to the public. And by doing something that's so quick and warning people about a public hazard, it's not going to gain massive trust in terms of banking, cryptocurrency, things that, as Val mentioned, need to be time tested. But it's getting a little bit of information out to the masses quickly. And that can be an important use and also show why there's a reason to trust it.
Yeah, I'll just add something that's gonna actually bridge both Val and Alexis's comments. So like, I agree, like it's like the institutions need to lead this. I think what we are starting to see, what has been going on for a while now, is institutions starting to play around, explore uses of blockchain, sometimes using private blockchains for things like supply chain, for things like carbon credit verification, for to even clear securities, like, right? So you basically have this institutional um, uh, slight adoption or exploring of blockchain use cases, and then what we have as far as the retail investors is you have, and I literally just heard about this on one of my podcasts I listened to this morning. Say it's a theme, and they were talking about, I forgot what the use case was, but they were talking about having blockchain in the background, not visible to the consumer, and there's risk to that, and I think acting comptroller Michael Sue of the OCC was talking about how like we try to like make use cases similar to things that people are familiar with because technology and blockchain are complicated. So there's definitely consequences to like overstating and oversimplifying something and using a bad analogy. But I think what we're going to see is there's going to be increasing uses of blockchain in the background by corporations. And then it's going to be like sometime later, and we're going to be like, oh, well, like the reason you're able to get your funds transferred so quickly is because actually blockchain was in the background powering that, like, right? And that's actually good for us, like, right, because we're going to get to a position where you're going to be able to have mass adoption and retail use of this technology, but because it's the institutions like taking the lead, we don't bear all of the risk now.
And we also don't have to understand. We just trust that if we do A, B is going to happen.
Yep.
How often do you really understand the mechanics behind a transaction?
Yep.
Do you know that securities, the SEC securities will settle T1? How many people know on what day, what the settlement cycle is for a
Yeah.
security transaction, right? You just take it for granted. You go to your little Charles Schwab account, you put in your buy my 500
Yep.
shares of Apple, and you assume that, those 500 shares are going to be delivered and you're going to be charged. And
Yep.
so that's where it's where entities and institutions are involved, you really don't have to understand the background. They are the ones that, just kind of, they socialize it and make it the norm for you.
Yeah, like Zelle versus Venmo.
Yeah.
Like two different regulatory regimes, but like, and there's different rules that apply to each. But from our perspective, it's a payment, like,
Yeah.
right?
When I get my money, now or later, essentially. No, and as we wrap up here, and I want to leave time for questions, of course. I guess the key takeaways from this panel, and how do you, since this is a room of law students and emerging lawyers into the space, especially people of color, how do we transform from being crypto curious to being crypto knowledgeable of this, and what can they do to best position themselves to be a cryptocurrency lawyer? And each one of y'all can go and give your takeaway as we wrap up here. Alexis, you can start.
Well, from the blockchain perspective, it's about figuring out what it is that you want to be interested in. So if you're interested in the SEC route, the financial route, or if you're interested in intellectual property, copyrights, patents, you're still first and foremost a lawyer. So you want to decide what type of law do you want to practice. If you want to practice more general law, contract law, then becoming a generalist about the knowledge of blockchain and cryptocurrency is useful. So you don't need to zone into a specific type of technology. You just need to know a little bit enough to know where to look for more information. But if you want to do the more specific type of law and become a specialist in my case, patent law, then you're going to keep abreast of what the newest things are, the newest technologies, the newest inventions, and you just gear yourself towards reading about that information and making sure you're getting your information from solid sources is always important.
Thank you. Tiffany?
Yeah, I mean, I touched on this a bit, but I would say just be intentional. So whether it's crypto, whether it's blockchain, whatever you're interested in, like be intentional about learning that and invest in yourself. You can't, even at large law firms, like you can't, you learn what cases come in. You can't let that determine your destiny or whatever you want to do. So I talked about a couple of podcasts that I listened to, like those, reading the news, but just like on your own, like making a goal and investing in yourself on a daily basis so that you have your 10,000 hours and become an expert in whatever you're interested in becoming an expert in.
Yeah, I would just echo what they've both already said. And it's really, if you're interested in a specific area of law, focus on that specific area of law. And to the extent that that technology is used as a tool in that industry, by default, you're going to have to learn it. You're going to have at least a working knowledge of it. If you are focused on the technology side of it, then maybe technology transactions, that's more your practice area and you focus on that. But I think that you can do both, have a subject matter and a tech focus.
Thank you. Thank you, all the panelists, for those takeaways. Before we wrap up, definitely open for questions. Sam, you have
Yeah, throughout this
so
conversation.
introduce yourself first.
Oh. Hey everyone, my name is Samuel Cadet. I'm a 3L at Howard. Throughout the course of this conversation, whenever you guys were discussing blockchain, the trust, as well as the implication and like the disparities that occur, my mind always went back to like how does this like affect like the Black community in terms of like the trust of the governmental entities and the information that we give, as well as like not really needing to know what goes on in the background, but how that can be used or whether there's biases against that or that may, affect that. So I guess my question to you guys is like, in terms of like thinking of blockchain and the best way to like kind of integrate it and like inform more of our community so that we're more proactive about it. Oftentimes we're behind the ball when it comes to like technological advancement and changes. What would you suggest or recommend in terms of like things that we, students as well as practitioners are able to do just to kind of bring this to hedge and make it so that it's like not like 1,000 like $5 words type thing, but like more jargon that they understand. Because what I've noticed is like when I did work with the Urban League, we had a recidivism plan and we were discussing it with the community, but we saw a lot of like not necessarily like backlash, but just apprehension to engage. And then what we realized is just like the terms we were using, you can't go up to someone and say, oh yeah, what do you think about recidivism? You got to kind of explain that to them. And so just advice in terms of like educating as well as like helping or promoting it amongst the community.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts about this. So first off, I'll say that like, we talked about blockchain and how it takes the place of essential intermediary. So if you think about like how people of color and like redline, there's a historic like history has shown us that intermediaries discriminate against people of color, particularly Black people, like, right? So that is the potential use. If you take out the person who's going to discriminate, it's important for us to be in the room to make sure that the technology is now not discriminating, right? So there is that use that people of color, Black people in particular, have realized. There's a blockchain alliance. If you follow up with me, I'll get you the name of the person, but like Cleve I'm gonna mess up her last name. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was like, so she has this whole alliance that talks about like blockchain, people of color. She speaks all over the world. There in 2 or 3 weeks, there's like the Black Women in Blockchain conference. Like, so there are like pockets of people thinking about this. And one of my good friends, Kristen Johnson, who's a CFTC commissioner, she has had a number of forums talking about like crypto and opportunities for people of color. And you'll probably notice like now the bill is kind of tarnished because of its connection to the CEO of FTX. But Senator Booker was one of the sponsors of like one of the bills for cryptocurrency. So there's definitely pockets of people understanding this, like, right? So if you're interested and that's a mantle that you kind of want to take up, like there's opportunities and organizations that you can connect with. And I know for us, like, right, like we were trying to switch around the panel time because we're both like crazy busy, but like, right, but like it's our obligation once you have this forum to be in rooms like this. Val and I literally speak all around the country together, sometimes together, sometimes apart. Sometimes she shows up, sometimes she doesn't. Like, right, but like, but we literally like we speak. Just kidding. She was sick. But literally, like, right, but like we make the time to come to these things. I came down from New York. I got to go back. I'm not, like, you know what I'm saying? But we make time to be in rooms like this and make sure that like you all hear the fact that like Cleve, Senator Booker, all these people are in this space thinking about these issues. And that's important as you continue to come up to give back and make sure that like the message and people aren't thinking about this, like that it kind of dies when someone graduates law school or is not in the room. So it's there, we can connect you, but it's definitely something that people are thinking about because it goes back to the central theme of like this distrust, right? And there's an opportunity to get past this distrust by taking away the discriminatory like individuals or institutions that have done things historically.
And I would say it's not even just domestic, internationally. This is that there's a global interest in using distributed ledger technology to address some of the disparities that are just inherent in so many of the systems around the world, and definitely if you're here pretty heavily in the US. But I would say industry groups are probably the best because they are like lobbying, they're advocates, and their reach is so substantial.
I will take some more questions, but we good with time? We okay?
We got online participants for the next panel. They kind of like bow them there. Okay. Yeah,
Clap, the emoji clap. Okay. Go ahead, CJ. you
real
wanna-
quick,
Real quick, yeah. Introduce yourself and say.
no comment, question.
Yeah, I'm a 3L, name is Valerie, and the panel has identified kind of two different things, so volatility and explainability in relation to cryptocurrency and blockchain respectively. And El Salvador is definitely paying the price for their huge investment in making their first country make cryptocurrency their national currency. So how can that serve, or is it serving as a case study? Is the legal community that's involved in cryptocurrency looking at El Salvador as a case study, and how is that affecting how your clients are moving in this space?
It's a great question.
I would say that central banks across the globe are testing the waters, but I still think that the majority of them think that the technology is too nascent, and they already had serious doubt about their monetary system. Their monetary system was already in peril. The US is not going down that route because we're still the reserve currency for the world. And if something happens domestic, it happens globally. So governments that are first world, they're not really testing that out. They're looking at it and they're figuring out how to do it. But the technology is just too nascent at this point.
Thank you, Val. Well, can we give a round of applause?
Let's say you did a great job moderating, and I think you did the best of inclusion. Alexis, it felt like you were here with us. So thank you.
Thank
Val,
you
I
for
just
having
want
me.
some Apple shares. You said 500 Apple shares. What? Val is our managing partner who has welcomed us here. This is the office that she manages. Let's give her another round of applause.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.